Hearts and eggs will break, and everything changes, but you keep going anyway, because science is asking questions, and living is not being afraid of the answer. This father, oh my goodness. I do have to say something about him first though, especially if you read the title of this video. I just want to make it clear, this father is not evil. This father did not do anything evil. However, he makes silly/stupid mistakes that hinder the health and recovery of his wife and the health and recovery and relationship with his daughter. And because it's something that keeps popping up throughout the whole book, it really started to get under my skin. Hi friend, so today I want to talk to you about the science of breakable things. First of all, you have to know this book is so beautiful and joyous and introspective and interesting and humorous. However, it is talking about a complex topic. That's why it bothered me even more when the father, who's supposed to be a therapist, was making all the wrong choices, or it felt that way at times. This story is about a girl named Natalie. Now, one day in late summer, Natalie's mother comes home from work and she doesn't interact with Natalie, she doesn't look at Natalie, she doesn't talk to Natalie, she doesn't whatever. She walks into her room, closes the door, and then Natalie does not see her. Not for a day, not for a weekend, not for a week, not for a month, but many months. And so this story is about Natalie, one, being confused why this is happening, two, knowing that her mom is a botanist and is working with another lady on this blue orchid, and this blue orchid is super rare, but they're trying to do these tests on the orchid because they found that this orchid can take all the toxins that are in the ground and in the air, and not only does it take it out of the environment, but it processes it in such a way where it can then be used in medicine to hopefully heal people. Now, we don't fully understand or know more about that just because Natalie doesn't know too much about it. One day when the other lady that's working with her mom gives her a flower, she gets really excited, and her mom take care of the flower, right? But because this flower is so rare, there's only a few places that it can grow, and there's only a few places that have it. So one of the places that has it, obviously, is the lab that her mother and this other lady work at. And the sadness that her mother has starts in Natalie's mind on the day that she comes home from work. She assumes that her mother has been fired. To be fair, I would assume that too. And her father, well, very well meaning, I think, but he's trying to protect Natalie, but he's also trying to protect his wife. Because of this, wanting to give Natalie's mother some space and protect her and whatever, says that Natalie can't see her mom. She can't even come in their room, at least not at first, which I think is fair. People who are in situations where they're having mental health issues and are sad, a lot of the times getting rest and getting quiet and being in darkness and being alone can actually be very helpful to their healing. However, if they go too long being isolated and in darkness and quiet, it can actually make the situation a lot worse. And I feel like Natalie's dad, being a therapist, should know that. So the very fact that he bans her from seeing her mom, and I just think that was a big mistake. But he doesn't want to really talk to her about what's going on. So Natalie doesn't know more about what's going on, right? She just knows she's not seeing her mom. She thinks her mom doesn't love her anymore, and that her mom is sad and doesn't really want to exist. That's the extent of what she knows. And then I was mad at Dad too, because he's a therapist. He helps people for a living. So it's basically his responsibility to help Mom. And if he can't even do that, what is he good for? Anyway, one day, beginning of the school year, her science teacher says, hey, you should sign up for this egg drop competition. And she's like, why would I do that? And so she kind of stops thinking about it because she's like, that's not interesting. I don't care, whatever. But then she finds out that the egg drop competition actually has a prize of a few $100s. And she's like, if I can win this egg drop competition, I can go, because she knows that this flower that her mom was working on only exists in New Mexico. And so she's like, if I win this competition, I can go get the flower, or my mom could go get the flower. So if I get another one of these rare flowers, maybe she'll be happy again. Sorry, like, no, it was just like written in such a way that very emotional, made me cry. It was done very well. Anyway, so she decides to enter, and then her best friend Greg joins her, and then another student who they think is like one of the smartest students in the class also join, and they're gonna do the egg competition, and they're gonna report their findings of the egg competition for like their big science project for the year. Okay, so I'm gonna go back and say, let's talk about the first mistake that this father made, because like I said, he made a lot of these like silly mistakes or little mistakes, but these little mistakes really impacted healing process of his wife and the healing process and relationship with his daughter, like I was saying before. So I think one of the first mistakes that the father makes is during Thanksgiving. So you have to remember, Natalie's mom has been in her room since late summer. It is now Thanksgiving. Natalie's dad, his mom, is coming for Thanksgiving. Now, you have to understand, his mom is Korean, and so he's part Korean, which then means Natalie is also part Korean, right? He makes a comment of, because his mother brings a dish and she brings some gifts that are specifically from Korea. And Natalie's obviously super excited and super grateful and thankful and whatever, right? Because she's having someone else in her home and like entering her life, and there's that social relational bonding that she kind of needs because her mom's still not in a great place. Anyway, her mom does come out for the Thanksgiving meal, and she acts like relatively normal. However, she doesn't stay out for very much longer. Now, I think the first mistake that the dad makes is he says to Natalie, and thankfully it was just to Natalie, not to the room, that he didn't really want to eat the Korean dish that his mother had brought. He just says something along the lines of like, oh, he's had a lot of her cooking and he doesn't like need it. But there is definitely an implication of like he either doesn't like it or he's like ashamed of it. Like the dad throughout the story is kind of ashamed of his background. And I think this is a huge mistake because Natalie is now at the age where she wants to know who her family is, where she comes from, and she's at a stage of her life she wants to understand where she comes from so that she can know who she's becoming, or she can know how that's affecting who she's becoming. And anyway, Natalie's at a point in her life where she hears what her dad's saying about his background and seeing that he's ashamed of it and how they don't really talk about it at all at home. And so she doesn't really she doesn't have a sense of belonging or pride about her background. I think the second mistake her father makes is not letting Natalie see her mother. Because guess what happens one day when Natalie does sneak into her mom's room? A few days later, her mom comes out of her room and actually talks to Natalie about not too much, but because her mom's still very not in a good place. But she does notice that Natalie's making something, and she asks about it, and it's basically the contraption they're trying to make for the egg competition. Natalie does kind of tell her that she entered a competition, but she doesn't say much more than that. And then later on, when Natalie again kind of sneaks into their room, brings the mother out again. It's like the one thing that's helping your wife want to be around people, want to socialize, want to try to keep learning and growing and becoming a person or being a person is her seeing her daughter. So I think another huge mistake is him not letting them, like banning Natalie from seeing her mom. But you have to remember the father also does positive things as well. He does try to, like, he keeps bringing up therapy to Natalie, right? But he brings it up at like the worst possible times where like she has to leave or she's in the middle of something, and so she's kind of against it, but like he's obviously like, no, you need to go to therapy, I can't take it, like I can't do it, you need to go to see someone else. Now, him wanting her to go to therapy is a positive thing. However, unfortunately, mistake number 3 is how he gets her to therapy. In fact, Natalie refers to how he gets her to go to therapy as guerrilla warfare, because he takes her out of another environment, throws her in the car, takes her to a place she doesn't know, doesn't tell her where they're going even when she asks, and then like puts her in this appointment. Now you'd think, okay, well, it's still positive because her going to therapy is going to help her in this situation. And I'd say, yes, it's a positive. However, it was the absolute wrong way to do it and the wrong time. See, talk therapy is only helpful if you're willing to talk, willing to listen. Natalie was not willing to talk or listen. So yes, she does need to go to therapy, but it was the wrong time. You see what I'm saying? However, the first real good thing that her father does is on the first snow day of the year, he takes her to the mall to go Christmas shopping. He says when they just get out of the car. Now, you have to remember, this a few days ago they had just gone to the therapist. He surprised her, so they weren't really talking, and they were obviously mad at each other. But I think this is really important, and definitely like the first real positive thing that the father does that's obvious. So he says, "Take my hand," Dad said after we got out of the car, sticking his hand out with mock seriousness. I took his hand even though it was really embarrassing, and I was secretly afraid of seeing someone from school. But to tell you the truth, I kind of liked it. I couldn't remember the last time I held a parent's hand, and even if we were just being goofy about it, it still felt nice. And she later continues to remember that and bring that up as like a positive memory. And I think that's something parents need to remember, is sometimes the smallest things, especially like small connection, is something that children remember and is meaningful to them long after. Sometimes the smallest things are the most important. And so that's part of the reason I think that is the first real positive thing that the father does. Because like I said, they had just gotten a few days before gone to the therapist, and they had this like real fight because she was kind of surprised attack and she wasn't ready to go to the therapist. And so that's the reason I think it was kind of a mistake in some ways. Not only how he got her to the therapist, but the fact that she was not ready to go to the therapist. Natalie's mom came out and was relatively herself on Thanksgiving, and so Natalie is assuming and hoping and dreaming that that will be the same on Christmas. Her mom will at least come out for a little while and be relatively normal, and like she feels like she can count on that, right? Of course, Christmas Day comes and her mother doesn't come out of her room. The second really positive thing that the father does is when Natalie's really sad that her mom's not coming out of her room, her father has Natalie's best friend come over, and this is the first time that Natalie actually opens up to anyone about the situation. But she does tell Twig about like the fact that her mom is having like mental things going on and is really sad, and because of that she's not acting normal and she hasn't really seen her mom for months. So she like tells her best friend all of this, and then after she says, "I hadn't realized until then just how sad I was. And hearing her say it cracked something open inside of me, and I started to cry." And so that is the first time that Natalie opens up about what's going on. And not only that, because she's finally able to open up to her friend about what's going on, she is then more comfortable opening up to a stranger about what's going on. So at that point, she's finally ready to go to a therapist and talk to a therapist and actually get something out of talk therapy. You see what I'm saying? Sometimes you need time to process something, and sometimes you need to talk to someone you feel comfortable and safe with before you talk to a stranger, especially if you're a younger person. And so that's why I'm like, I don't think her father taking her to the therapist and how he did it was right. But her going to the therapist eventually does become, like, that wrong eventually becomes a right. She did need to go to therapy, but she just started at the wrong time. And so yeah, she then goes back to the therapist a few days later, and she finally feels safe enough to tell the therapist what's going on. And she kind of does, but then the therapist kind of interrupts her and asks her to like tell her like a positive memory she has of her mother. Before our session was over, Doris asked me to tell my favorite story about Mom, and I realized I couldn't pick just one, because I have a good mother and I love her, and I never truly wished for anyone else. Anyway, she goes on to tell this beautiful story about her mom picking her up from school and taking her to this beautiful garden and telling her about all the plants. And then she says at the end of her telling the story to the therapist, she says, "In my memory, she is made of sunlight and fresh air," which is really important because up until this point, Natalie has been feeling like her mom, because her mom is not seeing her, that her mom isn't trying to love her. And she sees her mom as like this dark cloud. And so when she has this positive memory and sees her mom as sunlight and fresh air, she kind of realizes like the mom I have right now is not my mom. And that's really important to realize. If someone has a situation where a time where they're dealing with a mental illness or mental issue, to remember like that isn't the person that I know them to be. Right now they're going through something. It's really important. So anyway, the school year keeps going on. The science teacher keeps reminding them of the egg drop competition because again, they're gonna do a report on it for their final project, her best friend and the other student, Daria. I don't think I mentioned his name earlier. Anyway, it gets to the point, the day of this competition. And of course she's kind of nervous, kind of freaking out, kind of whatever. But her dad, again, trying to have more communication and connection with her, not only takes her and her friend to the competition, but kind of like has a talk with her about like how he's really proud of her for doing the egg competition because it's not something she would normally feel comfortable doing. He says that she has such good friends, especially through a hard time. So like he's starting to communicate more to her. She's starting to open up more to him. Things are starting to heal, right? It's actually really beautiful. Now, not to spoil the book, but unfortunately, they do not win the egg drop competition, which means that they do not win the money. And she specifically was doing this competition to get the money, right? So she kind of goes into this really bad sadness herself, and she goes from being talkative and talking to her dad and being okay talking to her dad to not wanting to talk to her dad. And I think that's fair, but it was just kind of sad because it was like one step forward and then 3 steps back. And I feel like a lot of the mistakes that the dad was making were that, like, we're making a step forward, but we're also taking steps back at the same time. It was really hard. So she goes home, and then of course her best friend calls her and is like, I'm sorry you didn't win the competition, blah blah blah. What if you said that flower is in New Mexico? What if we went to New Mexico? And for a moment, she's like, yeah, what if we went to New Mexico? And then she realizes, like, that's probably not a safe or real option, right? Especially because, like, her friend's calling her late at night. So she kind of gets all sad again, right? But then she remembers, you know where there's another one of these super rare flowers? At my mom's lab. Of course there's going to be a flower at my mom's lab. We don't need to go all the way to New Mexico. We could just go to my mom's lab. So her best friend decide to go to the lab. Of course this is late at night and she has to go get the keys from her mom. Now, you have to think about, if her mom was fired, why does she still have the keys to the lab? Just a thought. But anyway, Natalie knows that the keys to her mom's lab are in her bag, which is in her room. So she sneaks into her parents' room. I'm gonna read this. In the darkness of their room, I could barely make out their outlines. Mom curled up against Dad, and Dad holding her gently, even in sleep, as if she were breakable, as if she weren't already broken. She sees that. She sees how fragile her mom still is in that moment, so she's like, yes, I'm sneaking out. So she sneaks out. Her and her friend go to her mom's lab. Of course, because of a bunch of reasons, they get caught. But in getting caught, it actually ends up being a really positive, because instead of calling their parent, well, they do call their parents too, but instead of like calling the police, Natalie's like, no, call this other lady that my mom worked with, because she still works there, obviously. And this other lady comes and takes her and her friends home, and in the process it's actually a really helpful thing, because this lady is able to talk to her parents, and then Natalie is able to talk to her parents about why she wanted to go into the lab and why she thought getting the flower would help her mom. And in that moment, something breaks inside of her mom, because her mom and dad were obviously really worried because she was gone at like 2 or 3 in the morning to get a call from this lab in the middle of the night. And so, of course, both her parents are freaked out, and both her parents show up, and both her parents are there when the lady brings her home, and both her parents then want to talk to her. And because both of them are there and they both hear why she wanted things, something breaks inside her mom. And her mom, she doesn't snap out of it fully, because hard complex issues don't get fixed overnight. But it does make her mom want to be a part of her life more. And so, like, this is, I think a day later, Natalie finds her mom out in the greenhouse they have in their backyard. Her mom's planting flowers, blah, blah, blah. Mom always planted seeds anywhere and everywhere. If there wasn't room in the greenhouse, she'd find a teeny patch. And if there really wasn't room, she'd find a space on the side of the road. Whenever I ask her about it, she shrugs and say plants are beautiful. So when she sees her mom out in the greenhouse, she sees this as a very positive thing. So she goes outside and she tries to talk to her. And so when I asked why, I expected her usual answer, beauty for beauty's sake. But instead, she looked right at me, eyes full of hope and the shimmery hint of tears, and said, because we deserve a second chance. So her mom doesn't get better overnight, but her mom does start wanting to exist because she realized that she needed her daughter and that her daughter needed her and that her daughter literally tried everything and anything to make her better. And because of that, she begins to try to be happy, try to want to live, which I think is beautiful in many ways. But it is a long process. It's a journey and it's hard, but she tries. And so the book kind of ends with that of like them wanting a second chance and needing a second chance and getting a second chance. Like they get a second chance, and that's so beautiful. So like I said, the father made all these mistakes and it irked me because one, it kept coming up as plot points, and two, we knew that he knew better, but because he was too close to the situation, he made silly mistakes. However, those silly mistakes turned into the right things and turned into a reason to give Natalie to fight harder. And then when she fought harder, she was able to talk to her mom, and when she could talk to her mom was able to see that maybe she had a reason to live. So it had to happen how it happened, but gosh dang darn it, fathers sometimes make things harder. They also make things more beautiful. And that's why I don't think he's evil. I just got really frustrated with him throughout. Anyway, thanks for coming along on this journey with me, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. Bye. See you soon.